presentation. Sorry?
What if we might?
Okay. So, even if it's about Drupal 8, I will start with Drupal 6. We have to first, I want to talk about that Drupal 6 has a big problem that every information became almost a node, and that's why in Drupal 7, with the new introduced entities, there was a good step forward to separate the content, and there was still a big problem which wasn't resolved. If you check the structure of the database in Drupal 7, you see a lot of tables, but maybe even you actually see something like a maze game, right? When you try to find something which are content, which are configurations. So actually there's no solution for Drupal 7. Drupal 7 doesn't care about this. Okay, so we just have to face with the truth that in Drupal 7 we don't know exactly which information is configuration, which information is content. Well, we can understand, but we have to search and understand what we find in the database. Another big problem is that many modules save the configurations in different formats and different locations. So there's no unique way to store configurations. Even the core doesn't help us to save the configurations in a unique way. The only possibility is to use the simple variable set, get, and delete methods. I'm sure many of you use the features module. It's not in core, right? It's a country module, but it helped us to actually to extract the information, to save the configurations, and somehow to deploy these configurations to another environment. Another thing is that even if you use the features module and help us to resolve many things, but the result what we have actually is not really usable for non-developers, right? Because the feature module actually creates submodules which are still PHP, and the non-developer can't really understand what's there. The next thing is that the feature module can be used for anything. I mean, you can use many modules, and that module has as a support to export the configurations. But I think even you had once when you used a country module and actually you didn't find any support for that configuration to export. Okay. So Drupal 8 defines really clearly the type of the informations. We have content, we have session, we have state, and we have configuration. We will not, I will not cover the content, session, and state part, but the content are really something like what we had in Drupal 7. You already saw Daniel's presentation about the entities. The session and state are really near. So session is a kind of state information, but is specialized for user information. And the state and configuration, again, there's different API, different methods how it's resolved, but it's really almost is the same way how we use that. The main difference will be that we name it state or we name it configurations. So let's see exactly in Drupal 8 what we can see when we try to imagine the big picture. So what we have, almost everything are entities. So the entities are the parent of the content and the parent of the configuration. You can see on the right that the configurations sometimes can be outside of the entities. All these configurations are actually simple configurations. Okay, this image credit go to Gabor Hojci. And let's see what will happen if you start to design your custom module and how you can decide what you need when you want to define a type of data. Is it configuration or is it content? So the definition, what you see now is from the Drupal.org, and it says that when you have a huge number of items, that's probably it's a configuration. And if you have just a small information which will not repeat many times, that probably is a configuration. Sorry, I said configuration, the other person is content. And there's another definition for this, that configurations are something like when you say the type of something, okay? And the content is the thing within the type, okay? Next, the configuration versus state. When we talk about configuration and when we talk about state, it's really simple because the configuration is the piece of information, what we want to share, what we want to use this exactly same information on another environments. So the state information are in settings that we don't want to deploy to another environment. This can be, for example, when was the last run, right? So this information is not the same what we have on the production, for example. Okay? So configuration management. This is actually the initiative for the Drupal 8. The definition says that the configuration is something which is declarative, versionable, and deployable. It sounds right? Like a double rainbow. So. Okay, declarative. Maybe one of you don't or never heard about what declarative means. To understand this, let's see what exactly is imperative. Mostly in Drupal 7, and for example with features or exporting configurations, what we did, it was imperative. Because we try to define what we need, and we also try to define how to resolve that. Okay? So the features model actually extracted all the configurations, and also it was its job to know how and where to put that piece of information. The declarative is something different. It's about defining what you want, but let the core decide how to store and where to put them. Okay? So you can consider, for example, Irene's last slide was really imperative, declarative, right? She just asked something, but she didn't tell you that do not ask any questions. Okay, so not declarative are actually many times Drupal hooks are not declarative, because you can imagine a situation when you create a view in the back office, you export with the back office tool, you will have the code and you will put in your model, and you will implement the hooks, views, I don't remember exactly can put in that hook all of the exported code, right? Because the view actually gives you a PHP code to define the view, but you will wrap with a condition. And if you have a condition, it means there can be situations when this configuration will not be exported. For example, you will put dependency on another model. So that's why sometimes Drupal hooks are not really declarative. In Drupal 8, we will use YAMLs, and because the YAML, like JSON or XML files, are really static, right? You don't put any condition inside. So because of this, the YAML file will become declarative. About the Drupal 8 configuration system itself, so how it works, it's actually a key value store which will allow to do exactly what we discussed before. So the key value store allowing us to store complex configuration objects in declarative, versionable, and deployable way. Let's see how it looks exactly. When we talk about configurations or configuration objects, we actually refer some configuration which are in YAML files or in the database. Okay? Key value, it means the key in case of the YAML file, it means the name of the file. So it's really important that to name your settings in a unique way. Okay? So you can see the pattern above. You have the module name, you have the configuration type, and some cases you will see later we will have also a machine name of the configuration object. What you see again, that the key is the same. I mean, if we just check the user settings YAML file, the key here is the user settings, user.settings. The same thing exists also in the configuration table. You can see on the bottom is user settings. The value is the content of the file or is the serialized blob information in the database. In the database, you can see this information in the config table. Okay, so here are the values of the configuration object. I will talk only about the YAML file because what you see here, the same structure will be saved also in the blob file in the config table. Okay. I talked about declarative before, and as you can see, we no more have any PHP code. We just have really readable information. Right? So we have, for example, for the contact settings, we have a kind of associative array. So you can see the structures is like an array. Okay? So we have a default form. Here, for the default form, we use the feedback form. For the flood information, we can define any additional information like or multiple information limit interval, and you have user default enabled. And also Drupal gives you the possibility to use through configuration objects. You can get or you can set or you can even delete this piece of information. Okay, so we're done. Actually, we have a declarative configuration and it's really readable for non-developers also. Let's see the storage. Probably many of you heard about storage and heard about active and staging storage. So let's see exactly what are these storages. So in Drupal, active storage, it means all the configurations what are used. Okay. So when you load a configuration from, you ask Drupal to load a configuration, will always load there you can import. Okay, so you can add to your current environment, and what will happen exactly here, the staging will go to the active store. Okay? So, where are these active and staging stores? If you install your Drupal 8 sample, right after that you can see, you can open your settings.php, and on the bottom of the file you will see this information that you have the config directories are defined. The config directory contains also the information for active and storage. So the active and staging will be a simple folder under the site's default files, config, underscore, and a hash. This hash will be different for any installation. Okay? So what is important here, that if you tried Drupal 8 before, after the installation, immediately you saw a lot of YAML files in the active directory. Now this will not happen. The active directory at the moment will always be empty, because there was a change to move all the active the active storage in the database. So from now, the active, it means always the config table. Okay, there's also a possibility, if you don't like to use the database for the active storage, you can use the config tools country module, and you can change back to store the information in YAML files. But this can have an impact on the performance, and if you don't set the accesses to this folder as it should be, then it can be also a security problem. Okay, so again, here's the configuration table, and now the active store actually is this simple table. It's really important in Drupal 8 we have only one table for all the configurations. So when you search for a configuration, you just have to go inside this table. It's much more simple than Drupal 7. Okay. Let's see how and from where the configuration can be extracted, and how it goes to the active storage. So, as I said, the active storage is the store from where the Drupal 8, your site, will use all the configs, and the configurations can be added from a module, right? A module can implement its own configuration having YAML files under its config/install directory, and also can implement the config API, which means you can implement a configuration form. So you have the UI to save the configuration, and that will directly add it to the active storage. It's really important that your configuration from the module will be added to the active storage right after you enable your module. It will not delete your YAML files, it will not change your YAML files, we'll just copy and we'll have just copy in the active storage. You can have configurations from the staging. So if you add configuration in your staging directory and you import them, then actually we'll go to the active storage, and you can have also single import, which means at the moment exists a back office functionality with the UI where you can import just one configuration and not all. Yes, it's very important that never try to change any configurations in the active store, because that means that you try to hack your site. When you want to import something or you want to add new configurations, you have to use staging, you have to use module, or you have to use single import, because your environment has to be react on the changes. Okay? Okay, export and synchronize. Let's see first the full export. You have just a button, you hit the button, and this will give you a zip file which will contain all the information, all the configuration what you stored in the config table. As you saw, the config table was made with many rows. Each row represents one config, and from each row actually will be generated one YAML file. So if you have 100 rows, then you will have 100 YAML files in the zip. Full import, when you can upload your zip file, and after you upload the file, actually it will extract all the YAML files into your staging directory. Very important, if you upload the file, will not touch your active storage. Okay, so nothing will be modified at the moment. Let's see single export. So you can select your configuration. As I told you, we can have simple configuration and config as it is, or advanced configurations. And you have to select, in this example I just selected the simple configuration. I will select which configuration I want to export, and actually it will generate for me the structure of the configuration, what you can see also in the YAML file. So this is really nice and really cool feature, because if you want your module to define a new view, you just have to go in the back office, you just create your view, and then you save it, and that view actually will be a configuration. You will go to this page, and you can export the YAML structure which defines your view, and you can just copy and put in your module as a YAML file. And that's all what you have to do to define a new view. You don't have to define a new book, you don't have to add any PHP code for that. Single import. So it will happen the same way. You have to select what type of configuration you want to import. Select simple configuration. You have to give the key for the configuration, simple site. And as you can see before, I exported, the size slogan was not set. So after I just paste the same code what I just exported before, I put the slogan, I'm only here for the beer, maybe not, and just import it. So the result will be, if you check your site information, you will see the slogan is set. Really important, the single import always touch your active storage immediately. So importing from the staging, because before with the full import, actually the zip file was extracted in your staging directory. So as you can see, the list of the YAML files, the active store is empty because we are not using that folder, we're using the database. And just for the test, I modified the system site YAML file inside this staging directory. I modified the slogan that, hey, thanks for the beer. Okay, and just for testing, I deleted 2 of the files from this folder, the block configuration, Drupalcamp Cluj-Napoca, and system maintenance configuration. What will happen? We will arrive to the last part of this UI, the synchronize functionality, which actually its job to import the configuration. So before, with the full import, you just extracted all your information in the staging directory, and with the synchronize, actually you will apply. So you will confirm that, okay, I want this change to be made. And as you can see, the synchronize gives you a nice feedback about what happened. We have the system site which is modified, changed, and 2 of the file has been removed. Really important that you will notice that if you have the system site configuration with different unique ID, then the unique ID used for the current environment where you want to do this synchronization, you will be not allowed to do this. Because there was again a change to not allow to extract configuration from other side than what you have. Okay, the differences are actually, it's really self-explanatory, so you can see which was before, what was before, and what the new configuration. And, okay, back to theory. What happened when we want to deliver the configurations? As you know, we have the active and staging directories. So when we want to move our active configurations, because that are the real configuration what the site uses, so you just have somehow to move your active configuration to the production active storage. So how you will do that? You will export your active configuration, you will put in the staging directory, and you have to use Git or any system, any versions system to move or to push your changes up on the production side, but inside its staging directory, okay? So, after you deliver your changes, you have to go on the production side, or you can build also an update function, which actually synchronizes the configuration from the staging directory right in the active storage of the production. Is that okay? Okay. Yes. Don't forget to empty your staging directory before updating again, because there can be some situation when you delete some configuration from your active storage, and when you export it, actually that file will be not created, but you have already that file in the staging. Okay. To be sure that what you delete from the active, to delete also from the staging. Okay, so it's deployable, right? And again, which is very important, when you export your active storage, we export everything. And the staging directory is always used to import all the settings. So if you put only 10 files instead of 100, then it means only 10 configuration will remain in the production server, and the rest will be deleted. This is not so good, right?
What does that mean for like field contents? That I found in this card.
Well, when I made this test, let's see here, this was working. So really it was deleting the configurations. But I tried to do the same thing, only to let in the staging directory just the system side YAML files and to delete the rest. So what I get, actually it was a big error. So we will get even there that the configuration system in Drupal 8, maybe it's not perfect, but it's really in the good direction. So there was a lot of problems with that, but many things was resolved, by the way. Okay. So configuration data, when we talk about YAML files, we have simple configuration and we have configuration entities. Simple configurations, as you see, it's the key of this configuration. It will be your module name and the configuration type. As you can see, the context settings.yaml will have kind of associative array structure. The next thing, the configuration entity, is a bit different because in the simple configuration you can have anything. I mean, any kind of structure. So you can define every key what you see there, like default form flag, user default enabled, and so on. But in the config entity, you will have some keys like the ID that will be always there. Okay, and in the case of config entities, actually the key pattern is with one parameter in plus, which will be the machine name of the configuration object. Actually, the machine name of your config entity. Okay, so you saw that because YAML files are actually because we have files for configuration when we export it, we can use Git to deploy it, and we can create also snapshot about the configuration. This means it's really versionable and something made really well. And also because it's human readable, even for non-developers, that again, it's a big plus for the guys who made this system to work. Okay, so let's see how you can use to extract or to use some kind of operation on your configuration. Reading the configuration is done by using the Drupal config object. You have to load your configuration, as you can see here. So what you have as key for your configuration, you have to add the same things. So when you load by the key. Okay. After you load your settings, actually this config object will contain all what you see in your configuration. The next thing that you can extract your settings by just querying a simple or a subset of the information. You can also extract the flood with all its information, or you can use only one configuration from this array. Okay, so it's really nice, and I think it's really self-explanatory how to be used.
Can you put the whole information in config as an array?
Well, actually, I mean to save it in the configuration, or?
No, for example, you can make config an array that is associative and has the elements default form of the value, feedback, flood, which is an array, and stuff like that. Because at the moment I see you have to use the get function to get the values of the objects in contact settings YAML. So I was wondering if you can just take all the information and put it in config as an array.
Well, you have to use the get method to extract that information, and that actually will be an array. So if you use just get, actually will give you all the array from there. Okay, if you don't specify exactly the key, what you want from there, you will get all.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, something important that, as you can see, in Drupal 7, when you use the variable get, you have also a default value. At the moment, we don't have this. And I didn't found any solution. So you have to just check if it's empty, and you will use another value, what you define. Yes, maybe it's helpful that if your settings, for example, you put flood something in plus, and the key doesn't exist in the configuration, you will not get any errors. So it will be not a problem. Now, writing the configuration is a bit different, because what you've seen before, it was using the Drupal config, but what you get, it was only read-only. So you couldn't use the config object to save. You just could use the get methods. Now, if you want to set the configuration, then actually you have to use this pattern. So Drupal service config factory and get editable, and against the key. This will create a config object, and then you can use the set methods. Okay? It's really important. When you try to set a lot of information, then try to not do not save this configuration, actually this will save in the active storage. Before, when you read the configuration, will not read from the YAML, will read from the active storage. Okay? Removing the configuration, it's the same as we used in the case of setting the configurations, but you have the clear function, so you can clear only one item, you can clear like a subset of the information, and you can also delete all the configurations. It's really important that even if you set, even if you delete, clear your configuration, you have to save, because else it will not have any effect on the active storage. Okay, so let's see a really simple example about simple configurations. So you can define a module, what you will need an info file for the module, right? We have a routing just to define the path how you can access the configuration form, the UI, where you want to set some kind of configurations, and a class which actually defines your form. So the routing, it's really simple. I have nothing to tell about it. So actually you define the path which will actually load your form. Okay. The next, you have the form definition, which what is really important here, that your form, actually your class, which will define the form, must extend the config form base. Okay, in Drupal 7 we have form base, but for the configuration forms we have to extend the config form base. This will do a lot of things for us, and what we have to do, the classes which extend the config form base have to implement the get editable config names, which actually define your configuration key, and then you have a function which will build the form. Actually, we load our config. We define, as it was in Drupal 7, the array of the form element. In this case, we will be a text field. We have a title, and the default value, if we already set the information, we will extract from the config. Okay, and return the form, and we have just a simple submit, which actually use the config object to set the value from the form slip with the key of the first name. Okay, it's really simple. And what will happen? Actually, we'll define a form. You have a text field. I just put my name there. I will save. And if I will try to verify with a simple import export, you have to select, because this was a simple configuration, you have to select simple configuration, and you can see example dot simple settings, and you have first name and my name there. Okay, so it's really easy to make a UI and to save configurations. Okay, which is really important that we have in Drupal 7 configuration overrides. As in Drupal 7, we could use the config or conf variable, even in the setting.php. In Drupal 8, this variable was changed. We have not the conf, we have config. Okay, and that's all we can use to override any kind of settings. We have also language overrides, because in Drupal 8 you will be able to define the settings type, if it's translatable or not. So the language modules or system can actually react if there is something needs to be translated. And also many overrides can be from the module. Actually, the module needs to implement a service which will have a tag which will have the tag config factory override. Okay. define some kind of information. So here, but we somehow we have to define also how this structure is built. This wasn't mandatory before, but the schema files was introduced really as primary use for the multilingual support, because you have to define first. As you can see, we have the key context settings. So we have in the configuration schema that we define how the context settings will look. We have a type mapping, and under the mapping we will define the key and the type of the key, or the type of the value. Sorry. And we have again the flood. Under the flood again, so the flood is a type of mapping, right? Because under the flood we have two another values. Under the flood we have a mapping, which again defines limit and interval, and each type is integer. And we have the user default enabled, which type is boolean. So it's really important that the schema define how we look the configuration YAML file. Okay? For simple configuration, it's not a must at the moment, because it was working for me even for without schema. But for configuration entities, you always have to define, because the core already verifies and will give you an error if you don't have schemas. About the multilingual support, as you saw in the schema, we have types. For example, mapping, we have string, we have integer and boolean, and so on. So what does that mean? In the core, there's data types schema information where all the types are defined. So what you can see that the integer actually will use a class to typecast the value. So this will ensure that when you have a value for that configuration, that will always be typecast with this class. Okay, so you will be sure that which is the type of the value. If you have a string, we use another typecast class to convert it to be sure string. We have a mapping. A mapping, as you see, you can enumerate many other sub items. We have sequence. The main difference between sequence and mapping is that the mapping, under the mapping, we have as an associative array, like key value. But the sequence will say that no, I have just values. I don't. It's not important. The keys are not important. Why is this? Because when you use mapping, actually, what will happen? You always define how many elements you have there. But if you use sequence, this will define I will have I don't know how many elements there. This is very useful when it's about image style. When you have an image style, but you have an action, right? Like resize, scale, and you can have a lot. You can have 100, 1 million there. Okay, so that will be for sure defined as a sequence. Okay, and a label, which actually has the type and the type string. So a type can be constructed using another type. So this will be ensured that we will use this class to typecast. And we have a new settings, translatable true. This means when we handle information type of label, then the localization system actually will react on that configuration and will try to see if there's anything to translate there. Okay? Is it okay until now? Good. I think I'm out of time, but I have also an example, and I also prepared a link where you can see what will happen exactly with the config entity. It's almost the same. You will see how can you build a simple module to define configuration with config entity. About the schema, which is very important, that as type you will have config underscore entity. So that's the main difference. When you define something as a config entity, the schema should begin with the type of config entity. Okay, I don't have even time to show it how it looks in a sample code, but I put also a link where it's a really interesting article how to create a simple model with config entities. As I said, config entities and simple entities will always save in the same table and will always have the same structure, key value, a key and a structure like associative array. So this is really cool, I think. You will find many resources which are really helpful, especially the first thing, which is actually an online Drupal Drupal presentation. And yes, if you have any questions.
I do have one.
Yeah.
Back when you were talking about configuration being deployable, you said that the active configuration is stored in the config table and that the staging is in the staging directory.
Yeah.
But there is also an active directory. What's the purpose of that?
Okay, so the question was that what will happen because, as I said, the active storage is in the database, the staging storage is in the staging directory, but what is the purpose of the active directory, right? So at the moment, nothing. So I think this was just left there. That folder is really useless at the moment, and it's not used. And as you can,
does it work even if it's not there?
I think yes, because actually what happened with the change, it was the active storage was switched from the code level
so it's left
to the database level.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So even you have the possibility to use a country module, and then you can switch where you want.
I understand.
Active storage. Okay. Yes. Sorry.
Multiple staging.
Well, I didn't saw any possibilities for that. I don't even search for. So the staging folder is so versionable for me. It means that actually you can create snapshots about your configuration. Yeah. So actually, what you will put in your staging directory, you will use probably Git to push that. But when you push that, actually you created a commit, right? So you have a snapshot about that information. When you will make any change on the staging directory.
Yes, but my question was to have multiple subfolders where I can define.
No. So we will not use multiple folders under the staging directory. We always extract the YAML files inside the staging directory. So no other subfolders.
So I have to use Git
Yeah.
to see some differences between some configurations. So it's about.
For example, if you install your Drupal, you will export your active storage and you will put in the staging. You will go to the synchronization tab.
Understood, but I thought about an easy way to see differences between some configurations.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say, that if you extract this from the active, you will put in the staging, and then if you modify something in the staging, you will see with the synchronize.
I just asked that there is another feature about
I don't think so, but for sure, I saw a lot of modules that already is prepared for the configuration, like the config tools. I don't know exactly all the features which